people coming. I'm gonna start slowly as people are coming in. So a very warm welcome again to the WeEmpowerAsia Forum, Trends and Opportunities to Advance Women's Economic Empowerment in Business. And I'm delighted to see already, I was just looking through the chat, that there are so many partners, familiar faces, new faces, and a very warm welcome also to the really strong variety of distinguished speakers we're going to have today. Let me start with really putting out a huge word of thank you and appreciation to the EU, who has been really not only an ally, a partner and funder of WeEmpowerAsia over the last 3 years, but we really have enjoyed and learned and collaborated so much. And I think today's event, the WeEmpowerAsia Forum, brings all of this together. And so the objective for us today, during the next 3 hours, we would really like to share the learnings that we have gathered during that work on WeEmpowerAsia over the past 3 years, really hearing and listening from you, particularly the practitioners in the region. But we want to also kind of really take stock and reflect a little bit on where do we stand when it comes to advancing women's economic empowerment and business today. What has changed over the past 3 years? And even more importantly, we're going to be forward looking. We're going to be looking and exploring together. We're going to have some interactive workshop sessions to really explore more on where do we need to go to, what needs to be done. And I'm thrilled that we have really so many exciting speakers and experts with us. But before I turn into that and that exciting discussion, I think it used to be a tradition on WeEmpowerAsia, and particularly in the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic, that we always start with the audience. So this is going to not be different at this forum. So please allow me to just a very quick poll that everyone knows who is in the room, from where are you joining us today, from which region. Please also let us know from which type of organizations you are joining us. And last but not least, so if you scroll down, you will see the 3 questions. We would like to have a bit of a temperature check on what do you think, where do we stand on achieving gender equality, particularly in the world of business in our region. I see people are coming in and sharing with us. So as not very differently expected, we have most of our audience is obviously from Asia and the Pacific, from the region that we are operating from and where the program WeEmpowerAsia has been also targeted to. But we also do have some of our partners and also collaborators, particularly in Europe, and I see also some from North America joining us. And we have a very diverse audience in terms of companies from all kinds of sizes, but also our colleagues and partners from government, other UN organizations and civil society. So I think we are well set for a good discussion. And I'm just scrolling down and looking also on where do you think that we stand. And I don't know, Amy or someone from our technical team, if people can see it. If not, I can just share with you that, but most of you think like 60% saying that we are somewhat advanced. But we still have a percentage of more than 20% who saying we are not advanced, so we did not advance over the last couple of years. And some of them are also very positive in saying we are quite advanced, and even some of the audience says we are very advanced. So I think a mixed picture, but definitely also reflecting what we think. There is room for improvement, and this discussion is hopefully contributing to this and really identifying new opportunities that we can work out together. So I think just to, if everyone can see it, that I didn't tell something what's not true. So looking forward to have this discussion. But before we're gonna go and listen to you, I'm really thrilled to introduce and to give the word to Sarah Nips, who is our officer in charge for the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. And Sarah has been working very closely through different events and during WeEmpowerAsia to really guide us on this journey as well. Sarah, thank you so much for that, and thank you for being with us and opening this event. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Katja. Mr. Giuseppe Bassini, Deputy Head of the EU Delegation to Thailand, Ms. Leni Rosaline, Deputy of Gender Equality of the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection of Indonesia, Dear Excellencies, representatives from governments, businesses, and the wider development community. I would like to very warmly welcome all of you to today's event. I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for joining us today, and to begin by reiterating as well that women's economic empowerment is crucial for realizing women's rights and gender equality. Empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are really essential to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Through WeEmpowerAsia, UN Women, in close partnership with the European Union, has worked on this transformative agenda across 7 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. The programme has shown us that it is only through collaboration with all stakeholders that we can catalyse lasting change in the lives of women and girls. And for this, I would like to express our deep gratitude to all our partners in government, business, and the development sector across Asia and Europe. We're truly grateful for your commitment and your engagement in this shared vision. In the past 3 years, WeEmpowerAsia has demonstrated successes and achievements that underscore the importance of this collaborative spirit. We've seen a sharp rise in business engagement, a heightened focus on supporting women entrepreneurs, and growing recognition of the need for gender-responsive business cultures. Importantly, WeEmpowerAsia has encouraged more private sector stakeholders to implement the Women's Empowerment Principles, or WEPs, a holistic framework to promote gender equality and women's economic empowerment in the workplace, marketplace, and in the wider society. Today, more companies are making public commitments to gender equality and joining the WEPs community. In fact, since the start of the programme, these commitments have exponentially grown to more than 1,700 companies across the region. More than 1,000 companies in Asia Pacific actually signed the WEPs since the start of WeEmpowerAsia in 2019. This means there have been more companies committing to the principles over the past 3 years than in the 9 preceding years. In addition, WeEmpowerAsia has clearly demonstrated that when provided with appropriate support, women entrepreneurs bring innovations that can transform our business as usual. For example, the Care Accelerator supported entrepreneurs to provide creative and affordable solutions in the care sector, thus turning the unjust burden of care overwhelmingly borne by women into economic opportunities for women. At the same time, working closely with governments across the Asia Pacific has crystallized into important laws and policies that will enable women's entrepreneurship and foster gender responsive business conduct. Just to take one example, a new SME law has been established in Vietnam to advance more gender responsive women's entrepreneurship. And WeEmpowerAsia in India has led the efforts on mainstreaming gender in the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights of the Government of India. In Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, the programme has generated increased attention to the need for greater transparency and gender reporting by businesses. Crucially, WeEmpowerAsia has created a movement of ideas, increasing awareness and engagement on these key topics among more than 22,000 participants in over 370 events. We are also very excited to share that our new WEPs Trends and Opportunities report will be launched soon, which identifies some of the pivotal areas for closing the economic gender gap. Action in critical areas is very much needed, including on procurement from women-owned businesses and supply chains, increasing corporate social responsibility and community engagement, addressing sexual and gender-based violence and harassment in workplaces, and encouraging more employer-supported care facilities. As we take stock today of our progress and lessons learned, we need to make sure we do not lose momentum. There is still a long way to go on advancing gender equality in workplaces, marketplaces, and communities where businesses operate. With the far-reaching effects of COVID-19 on the economy and society, in fact, women need even more support to recover. We are very grateful that many of the important inroads made through WeEmpowerAsia will continue with the support of our donors. We sincerely thank the Australian Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, for partnering in the new We Rise Together programme, which will strengthen our work on gender responsive procurement in Thailand and Vietnam. DFAT has also generously supported the upcoming WEPS Awards, which recognise business action to advance women's economic empowerment. The growth from 300 applications in 2020 to 700 applications in 2021 at the regional level, and the expansion of the awards beyond WeEmpowerAsia countries signals the growing number of companies that self-identify as having exemplary practice in embracing the WEPS. We strongly encourage all businesses, including SMEs, to apply for this year's awards. We would also like to very much thank the International Research and Development Centre of Canada, IDRC, for their investments to advance the important issue of care entrepreneurship as we move forward. The forum today will highlight some of the key trends, ideas, and solutions for achieving women's economic empowerment in our region. So I wish everyone a good exchange today, and let's make sure that our progress made so far can be mainstreamed and become standard for all businesses in Asia and across the world as we go forward. Thank you so much, everyone, and back to you, Katja.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for kicking us off for today. And to be mindful of time, please allow me to directly move to our next speaker, who is Mr. Giuseppe Busini, who is the Deputy Head of the European Union and the delegation to Thailand. And Giuseppe has been joining us on so many events and has been supporting us over the past 3 years in his capacity and his team's capacity. And I see some of his team members are also online with us today, but Giuseppe will address us with a pre-recorded message, which I would like my colleagues to please share with us. Video up.
Distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank Ms. Sarah Neebs, Officer in Charge UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, for a warm welcome earlier and for the strong partnership the EU has enjoyed with UN Women, especially in the context of the WeEmpowerAsia project over the past 3 years. I am honored to be providing the opening remarks for this event, along with Ibu Shinta Kamdani, the chair of B20 Indonesia 2022. I would like also to recognize among the speakers and attendees today some of the project's key partners and supporters. Ms. Ruembadi Suwanmongkon, Secretary General, Securities and Exchange Commission of Thailand, Ms. Lenny Rosalind, Deputy Minister for Gender Equality, Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Indonesia, ACW Chair 2021-2022, ASEAN Committee on Women, Aurora Boots Garcia, co-founder, Philippine Women's Economic Network. There are also many more partners and supporters from governments, businesses and civil society, and I'm thrilled that we will be hearing from many of them shortly. I truly appreciate all your support and collaboration to advance gender equality in business, which continues to be a priority for both Asia and the European Union. The EU strives to be a union of equality, with our own gender equality strategy, as well as a gender action plan for our engagement outside the EU. And this is why, beyond working with all of you on women's economic empowerment in WeEmpowerAsia project countries, we also mainstream these efforts in our policies and strategies at home, and ensure it is reflected on how we guide our companies and the trade between our two regions. Earlier this year, the European Commission adopted a proposal for a new directive on corporate due diligence and accountability. It requires companies to integrate due diligence on its impact on the environment and human rights, which includes due consideration to gender equality and non-discrimination. And this will apply to EU companies as well as non-EU companies with large footprints in Europe, many of whose suppliers are in Asia. We hope that this will encourage even higher standards of responsible business and trade between our regions, especially to shape an inclusive economic recovery that works for all. I'm proud of the work we have done through WeEmpowerAsia over the past 3 years. from enabling a more gender-responsive business environment through new policies to direct trainings of over 6,000 women entrepreneurs to build more resilient businesses and expanding their operations. The project has also raised the awareness and encouraged the commitment of businesses, both local companies and EU multinationals, towards promoting gender equality through the women empowerment principles. To date, we have over 1,700 web signatories in Asia and the Pacific, and many of these signatories either work with or are local subsidiaries of EU-based multinationals. Furthermore, the project takes on an ecosystem approach to convening different stakeholders and encouraging partnership between companies of various sizes from both Europe and Asia to ensure holistic and sustainable collaborations. For instance, its Industry Disruptor program is the first ever mentoring and acceleration platform for women-led businesses that are interested in being part of the textile industry supply chains, scaling up sustainable operations and expanding to new markets. Some of the major brands working with these women entrepreneurs, I'm proud to say, include the EU-headquartered brands such as H&M, among others, as well as national brands in India such as Okai. At this virtual forum, there will be also a dedicated workshop session on this topic, where I look forward to hearing the speakers' reflections on how some of its successes may be applicable to other sectors as well. Most importantly, I look forward to hearing the reflections from all of you on what has been done and what we still have to do to advance women's economic empowerment. These points will also be highlighted in the new report, Trends and Opportunities to Advance Women's Economic Empowerment in Business, which will be presented today. Finally, I wish you all a fruitful discussion and insightful reflections as we look back on the progress and impact over the 3 years of WeEmpowerAsia and how we can sustain good work and partnership going forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Great hearing from Giuseppe, particularly also on the connections between Asia and the EU, and really the intent of the program to connect the chains from Asia to Europe and Europe to Asia. And within this, I think it's a great transition to welcome our next speaker, Ibushinda Kamdani, who is the CEO of the Sendesa Group. But even more, Ibushinda has been a strong advocate, a supporter of gender equality in Indonesia, but in her new capacity as the chair of the B20 community in Indonesia 2022, Ibushinda has really worked very closely in partnership, not only with UN Women, the governments, and many of the stakeholders on the table today. Ibushinda, a very warm felt thank you to you and for all of your contributions so far, and we are really happy to have you here to opening this really important forum. Over to you, Ibushinda.
Thank you, Katja. And this is an honor for me. It's an honor for me to speak at this important occasion. I think we know that in order for us to achieve an inclusive and resilient also economic recovery, gender empowerment is a means to an end. By 2025, I think gender empowered economies will give 28 trillion in economic opportunities to the global economy. And although there is a progress in empowering women in Asia Pacific, where at least 20% of women have held managerial position today compared to 2 decades ago, however, this opportunity is not evenly distributed in the region. For example, women are underrepresented in middle and senior management positions, where women occupy only 17%. This gap has been exacerbated by of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. And we can see the example that women employment fell by 3.8% compared to 2.9 declining for men. And of course, this is a very critical issue to focus on. As more women leave the workforce, the number of women in leadership position is likely also to drop significantly. These are at least three aspects. If I see there are three aspects that hinder women work after COVID-19, and I would like to share some of my perspective also in this occasion. First is the automation and digitalization. I think for men and women, we can see that automation and AI can bring opportunities, but only if they can navigate their way through periods of systemic change. However, I think we need to understand that in the world of science, women are minority. So less than 30% of the world researchers are women, and this underrepresentation occur also in this region. Additionally, a survey from McKinsey found that between 40 to million and 160 million women employed may need to switch between jobs and often to a higher skilled role, and in order to stay employed and secure for new job opportunities. So surprisingly, it is estimated that as many as 80% of jobs in Southeast Asia will require basic digital literacy and applied ICT skill by 2030. And the second thing is, while companies have signaled their commitment to diversity, equality, and inclusion, women still experience discrimination in the workplace. And even before the pandemic, jobs with high concentration of women were characterized by low wages, long hours, limited opportunity to career development, and exposure to occupational health, safety risks, and violence and harassment. So when the pandemic hits, this trend puts women workers at greater risk of being laid off, seeing a significant contraction of their working hours, and experience a further deterioration for their working conditions. And also the third, the challenges women face in surviving and advancing in the labor market stem largely from the disproportionately increasing burden of unpaid care, shopping, cooking, cleaning, childcare, and parenting in the household. So prior to the pandemic, on average, women has almost twice as much unpaid care as men. And this crisis has added a very uneven addition onto already unequal baseline. According to McKinsey again survey, 40% of mother compared to 27% father have added 3 or more additional hours of caregiving day to their schedule. So all of this issue above will certainly have an impact on the high intensity of burnout and fatigue, which is very crucial factor that underlies the great resignation for women to leave the organization. And without immediate action, these challenges will lead to a massive declining of women from long-term unemployment that leads to declining numbers of women in the leadership pipelines, along with social disruption that dial back the progress made on gender equality. It is obvious that we must not let this happen, and losing women means losing economic opportunity. It is important to note that the advantage of gender inclusiveness are obvious, not just for women, but also for everyone. And I believe that adversity comes also opportunities. The pandemic may create such huge challenges, but it also creates hopes for change and transformation for even better future. Fortunately, a crucial component of the answer is there in front of us, unleashing the economic power of women as one of the world's most undervalued resources. I'm really pleased that what WeEmpowerAsia seeks is in line with what also the B20 Indonesia presidency vision to achieve innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth with gender empowerment as the essential step to amplify post-pandemic development through the establishment of Women in Business Action Council. We are also pleased to have UN Women supporting our effort as network partner in the B20. Through this presidency, we emphasize 4 focus on gender empowerment. First, empowering women in the economy. and closing gender gaps in the work of work. This includes also protecting and amending policy in social rights and creating the level playing field for women to participate in as entrepreneurs and employment that encompass the leadership of the millennial women, women in startup, and women also in small medium enterprises. Second is accelerating labor market reform. This includes expanding women access to the labor market, improving flexibility, and reducing informality, as well as making sure to bring women back in the workforce after the pandemic. The third is encouraging the integration of gender statistic and sex disaggregated data in corporate reporting. That gives company purpose and helps them set and socialize their top priorities. On this particular focus, B20 also urged businesses to develop a gender reporting framework and guidelines. In addition, we also seek to facilitate agreement on a common gender reporting framework. And the last one is building digital resilience and future skill to thrive post-pandemic. So including upscaling a women future skill and embracing technology, addressing the global gap in STEM and digital skill of women that will be critical in the workforce of the future. Ultimately, they needed to be viewed as collaborative effort for all stakeholders. Many organizations, governments, businesses, and civil society groups have implemented substantive initiatives to support women in work, but many remain disconnected and operate independently. Therefore, a focused multilateral effort is needed to make the critical elements of success available to any woman who wants to enter and grow within the workforce, regardless of where they are in the world. So to this end, under one accord, B20 Women in Business Action Council has established a practical initiative. So one of the legacy projects that will be an outcome of the B20 is the One Global Women Empowerment Platform. So OGW is a platform that aggregates existing capabilities and network to accelerate and scale impactful women empowerment effort globally, thus enabling growth, development, and acceleration of women-led businesses and women in the workforce. It will be supported by technology and a permanent secretariat and will multiply and scale the effort of existing platform, initiative, and network that already provide critical enablement to promote the participation of women, both in the employment and also in the businesses. And I think the proposed 5 pillars that have become the focus is first, crowdsourcing to share successful policies and promote ideas, program, and partnership. Crowdfunding to invest the empowerment of women entrepreneurs and women in the workforce. To curate, to provide references of guidelines for training program resources to develop capability. Clarify to support women in outstanding also understanding the regulations, laws, and requirement to scale their business, and communicate to update, inform, and report on OGW or community and general public initiatives. So these 5 pillars are essential elements to support women employment globally. Digital capability, cross-border knowledge sharing, funding, and technical support, and supporting policy development efforts are the critical elements that will need to be executed in parallel and around the world. In particular, in Asia, with your support now, we have our critical action in front of us. Let us begin to build a successful collaboration for Indonesia G20 presidency and leave a lasting legacy for inclusive post-crisis recovery. Women's empowerment remains a common denominator and a global need for all those who care about and not only fairness and diversity, but also productivity and prosperity in more inclusive and resilient societies and economies. If we can accomplish this, we will all benefit. So let's work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibushinda, for such inspiring words and opening comments. And I'm sure some of the areas that you have mentioned and really nicely summarized, we will discuss in some of our breakout session and also in our opening panel. But I just want to say one thing which is really nice to see and a really good experience we have made in collaboration with you and the team is to use WeEmpowerAsia, which is a very regional program, right, to collaborate together, but using your force and the B20 force also to elevate the agenda into the world and not remain it into the region where we are operating in. So that's really great. And thank you so much for your leadership. And please keep your camera, sorry, keep your camera on, because while we are still all together here and have our cameras on, I would like to ask my colleague Soya to just take a very quick picture of everyone. So if you want, please turn on your cameras. And so, yeah, over to you to just take probably a couple of pictures.
Sure. Thank you, Katja. All right, if everybody can turn their cameras on. 3, 2, 1. And maybe one more time. Last request to turn your cameras on for a quick photograph. All right, thank you so much. We can move forward now, Katja. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Soya. And it was really nice. I was actually just going through the gallery and see some really familiar faces. Really nice to have you all with us. Let me help you to just kind of guide us for the next part of the forum today. And I just noticed I did not introduce myself in the beginning. So I'll just gonna quickly do this. I will be moderating, as you can figure out already, the whole forum today and guide you through. But I have been also the pleasure to lead WeEmpowerAsia over the past 3 years. And I have to say, I'm very proud that we actually have this meeting today together and bring everyone together to share our experience. So what we will be doing over the next 2 more hours is we're going to have a very exciting opening panel right now. We're going to be sharing some research findings in there. And then what we will do in the second part, we will have a break after that panel. And then we will go into deep dive workshops for 2 rounds. So we will every time have 2 rounds, parallel workshops that you can choose your preference topics, but I'll explain this when we come to that. And then at the end, we will have all the workshops to just briefly report back so that we really can get some insights for us, which are the areas that we want to take forward and how to take these forward. So really to make sure that we set us for the next period to continue and strengthen the work that we have seeded with WeEmpowerAsia over the last 3 years. So with that, I would like to really continue and just introduce someone very strongly engaged in WeEmpowerAsia over the past 2 years, our research partner, Value for Women. So research has been a really important area, particularly in the space of women in business, because a lot of things we just did not know. And I think the work that we have been doing together with Value for Women has really helped us to understand better and to really strengthen not only the program, but also strengthen forward-looking strategies. So one of the key research pieces, which we will also put in the chat, is an research which is called ASEAN Ecosystem Landscaping to Advance Women's Empowerment Principles in the ASEAN region. A really very thorough piece on really understanding the policy and private sector environment in ASEAN, particularly, with very clear recommendations. But today we're not going to be talk about that. We're going to be hearing from Luis Marquez, who is the Director for Advisory Services at Value for Women, on a new research that we have been doing together, a trends and opportunity research for business in the region. It's not yet out there, but we thought it would be great to use the momentum and really have a sneak preview of what we have learned from our partners, from the companies we have been working with, but also from the governments and others. So Luis, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours to share some of the initial findings that you have seen.
Great, thank you so much. Just sharing my screen. And yes, so as Katja said, I'm Luis Marcus from Value for Women. And today, what we're going to do, you can see my screen? Yes. What we're going to do is just, as Katja said, is talk about a forthcoming report that we are creating with the UN Women team, which is basically compiling a lot of the data sources that the team has developed over the last few years, particularly surveying and getting data from companies, so that we have a good idea of what we've learned, where companies are. And then also we've surveyed companies and stakeholders in the private sector in the region to see what is next. So we're going to give you a preview of some of those insights that we're gathering today. We'll do it quickly, but like Katja said, we have a forthcoming report right now in July that'll come out. You'll be able to find out and get more detail about all this. And finally, we will be also presenting looking forward, and I think that's the theme of today. So what are we seeing now? What are the trends? And looking forward, what actions can be taken? Where can the private sector go to promote gender equality? I'm going to be, you're going to be seeing multiple statistics, but mainly what the sources we're using is, again, a survey of companies and private sector stakeholders done recently and over the last couple months. The database, and also the databases of the gap analysis tool, which, by the way, if you don't know it, it's a free self-assessment that you can take online from UN Women to understand how your company is doing on promoting gender equality as it relates to the webs. So we're going to be using some of that data for Asia companies as well. Okay, so the first insight, what's the first thing we're seeing? Well, we know, and it's been mentioned, that there's increasingly more companies that are committing to promote gender equality, and we can see that at least in the women's empowerment in Asia countries, where there's been programs. Just what you see here is just an increase in the amount of web signatories, right? Companies are signing the webs. And a lot of these companies are small and particularly medium enterprises, right? So why that's important is because traditionally a lot of the companies that might be web signatories are multinationals. And what UN Women wants to see is also more local companies. And so when we see small and medium enterprises, that's also a good thing, showing that there's more local commitment. So there's a lot of commitment, but when we look at the companies and what they're doing, and the data we're showing you is from obviously a group of committed companies, right? A lot of these companies are filling out these surveys. They are already web signatories, and so they're already committed and engaged. But even with these committed and engaged companies, we see that when we ask them about progress, about institutionalizing that commitment, there's still, a lot of companies still don't have a gender action plan. A lot of them don't have specific targets. And a majority of this engaged group does have that, but we still have multiple companies that don't have that. And then we'll talk about, and once we drill down on what those actions are, we start seeing that there's some divergence between that commitment and the action. And I think that's the theme of the insights that we're seeing. And then another thing that we saw is, well, with the COVID-19, there's a silver lining to the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So lots of setbacks to gender equality, which were just presented, I think, very well. So COVID-19 has been an enormous challenge towards gender equality, but the silver lining is that maybe we see that companies are picking up on that, and the work from home and all the changes that happen. At least companies are telling us that has led to more focused thinking on different different issues of gender and diversity. So that's the silver lining, is that maybe that there's a potential opportunity here with all these setbacks. Finally, when we asked about where this commitment was, where the focus of a lot of the energy and actions are from companies, they told us women in leadership came out very strongly, right? So a lot of the focus, a lot of the actions that have been taken by the private sector are on promoting women in leadership, which makes sense, right? I think that's where a lot of the focus has been globally. But even here, we have the same message, right? So companies tell us a lot of progress has been made. When they talk about where are the areas where most progress have been made, most of them talk about women leadership. But then when we ask for sample or we see data on how many companies have time-bound measurable goals and targets, right? KPIs, which is how we know the private sector will elicit change within the company, we have less than a quarter that are actually like have some sort of goal to, you know, to create this pipeline of qualified women towards top management. And we know that in the ASEAN region, for example, only 24% of middle and senior management jobs are with women. So that's where the focus has been, but also where we have a big challenge. And again, commitment that needs to still be translated into action, right? And then when we look at women in the workforce, that's also where most of the actions and activities of companies that are engaging with have been engaging with UN Women in one way or another, or through these surveys and data, that's where the majority of actions are being taken, right? Whether it be recruitment of women, retention of women, and creating inclusive workplaces. But even here, we see a few areas where there's, again, within this group of companies that we've surveyed that are engaged with UN Women, right? That are very committed. We still see that very few have provided employers some sort of childcare facilities or subsidies, right? And then when we look forward, when we asked about forward looking, only about a third thought that caregiving support and the care economy, which we know is a big issue. We know, you know, some of the stats were just presented today about the challenges around COVID and care. See this as a priority moving forward, right? And then the other key issue, which we'll drill down on the report. We don't have a lot of time right now, but another key issue, of course, is sexual harassment in the workplace, violence against women. And I think the astounding stat for us is only 36% of companies that have taken the WEBS tool provide confidential support to victims of domestic violence, right? And we see this as value for women when we work with companies. This is an area which we're surprised to see even large companies, big banks, still don't have a specific strategy or protocol for sexual harassment in the workplace. So there's still there's work to be done there. And then finally, so that's looking inward. A lot of the action is looking inward. And then when we asked about, well, what actions are being taken with the value chains, with the income generating activities, the products and services, and how you develop those products, how you source those products, how you deliver those products. And we see that, again, in this area, less than a quarter of companies are taking some sort of action on a host of areas, right? Whether it be marketing to women, creating feedback loops with women, ensuring that, in your value chains that there's no gender-based risks and things like that. So basically the message is there's a lot of focus on the workforce, but the business potential of bringing in gender diversity and a gender lens to products and services, targeting, the women's economy, and also the gender and social impact potential is untapped by companies in the region. And finally, something that's very important for UN Women, for us, a value for women, is reporting, right? So without transparency, we think that we can't have accountability, and then the stakeholders of companies are going to have a more problematic time pushing for change. And what you see here is that the gray area is the data that's being tracked internally, again, by a very engaged group of companies. So what we're seeing is companies are, generally speaking, right, about 2/3 of companies track data, but that's not necessarily publicly reported, right? And then some indicators it's even less, right? But even things as basic as how many men and women are employed, only 1/3 of companies publicly report on that. And even though a majority seem to track that, right? So and then when we get into more complex indicators like procurement spent on women-owned businesses, a lot fewer companies seem to publish that or track that. So we think there's still a strong opportunity for different stakeholders in the private sector, including regulators, including governments, to create incentives for more reporting to create that transparency and accountability. And then moving forward, when we asked about priorities, right? What priorities do you have as companies moving forward? We see that basically the message is that companies are looking at deepening the work that they've done with women in leadership, awareness, and workplace equality. But some of these issues that we think might, that we think, like the care economy, as I mentioned before, all of the other issues where we see a lot of action is not being taken, institutionalizing gender with targets, action plans, prioritization. That's not necessarily the priorities of companies moving forward. So we see that moving forward, we see that it's important for different stakeholders that want more gender equality in the private sector to help incentivize a few key actions, right? So one of those key actions is to move from awareness to action, right? So we've been talking a lot about commitment. Commitment is great. We want more companies that are committed, but we need to, we need to move towards change, right? And to move towards change, we need some key institutionalization and prioritization by companies. The care economy, that's an important piece of the puzzle, right? Like supporting caregivers, men and women caregivers, to create more equality in the workplace, moving from the workplace conversation to marketplace, right? We think there's a business opportunity, right, to bring in a gender lens to the women's, to get companies to think of the women's market, but also to basically provide solutions that address women's needs. We've seen that through things like the WEP Awards that UN Women has, in soft incentives, right, and recognition of companies helps. So we think stakeholders that are trying to promote this can keep on doing this, promoting the companies that are doing well. We want to promote those companies, right? We want to reward companies, even if it's not through financial incentives. But also there's an increasing amount of money and resources by investors, institutional investors, private capital investors that are looking, a lot of these investors are looking at gender lens investing as part of their strategy. So there's a lot more money moving with a gender lens. And we think that there's and particularly in Asia. So we think there's an opportunity for using that money to incentivize and scale progress. And finally, more work around incentivizing reporting on gender indicators, and as mentioned before. And so here, as a final point, we asked also companies what they thought about what governments and regulators and policymakers should do. And over 80% of them, right, on whether it was 80 or 90%, agreed that they want regulators to provide more guidance on reporting on gender equality, and where we thought what was interesting is set targets for women's representation on corporate boards. Again, our sample is engaged companies, many of you, but we thought that was interesting. We thought there'd be a little more reticence even within the sample. So the message is there's more, the path forward needs to move beyond just deepening what's happening, right? To moving into all areas, facets of the business and bringing in gender there. And there's an opportunity for governments, regulators, and policymakers to make a change here. And that's also being demanded by the private sector, which is great. I'll stop there. I know that was a lot, but
thank you very much, Luis. A lot of food for thought, I think, and a lot of discussion opportunity for the next 1.5 hours in our first opening panel, but also in some of the workshops we will be going into some of these areas deeper, as you will have seen in the agenda. But please let me use that as an inspiration to make this very practical and see what we have heard now. How does this resonate with practitioners?
Yes.
In the space, and just maybe a word for people not speaking, just mute yourself. So I'm really delighted that I have 4 very diverse speakers with us, whom I will be introducing one by one while I'll engage in a conversation with them. And the first speaker I'm I'm inviting to speak today is Mike Fiore, who is joining us as a chair of board of directors from Deloitte Southeast Asia. And it's always good to start with a business, right? So this is what we are all about here, and kind of looking, how can we make the world of business work for women? And we have heard quite a little bit of that from Louis and from the previous speakers. Mike, we have also heard from just the data that very much companies are showing more commitments of the ones that we have been interviewing, which is great. But we also see that there still is this gap from commitment into action, and particularly in areas which I think Louis highlighted, where companies see most action is needed on women in leadership and advancing workplace equality. And I know Deloitte has been doing very practical actions. Will you be able to just share a little bit with us, how can we kind of make this practical, actionable, moving from commitment to action? Over to you, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the panel today. Yeah, several years ago, we came out with our All-In initiative, which is Deloitte's global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So All-In focuses our actions around 3 pillars, which are working towards gender balance, fostering inclusion for our diverse workforce, and supporting mental health and well-being. So we included gender balance as one of the pillars for All-In for a few reasons. We were noticing the senior management teams and the boards of our clients were evolving and becoming more diverse, including having more female representation. So we needed to make sure our engagement teams were equally as diverse as the clients they were serving. I would also say, even though generally our annual recruitment classes are by and large 50-50 in terms of gender mix, we were losing a disproportionate number of female professionals over their career journeys. So this represented a very capable and skilled talent pool, which we needed to better engage with to address the reasons why they weren't staying with us to make partner in the firm. So each of our member firms across the world had to commit to very specific KPIs, especially around increases to the percentage of our female partners and females in leadership positions within our respective firms. So for Deloitte Southeast Asia, we have committed to increase the percentage of female partners to at least 37%, and to have 38% of our leadership roles to be held by females by the end of our 2025 fiscal year. And I'm being held personally accountable for these commitments as the chair of our board, but our executive team and each of our partners have leadership accountability for All-In built into their KPIs. So what are we doing to action these commitments? So we've doubled down on our commitment to accelerate the advancement of women with our Southeast Asia gender strategy by first focusing on developing inclusive leaders, as we believe leaders set the tone at the top. So all of our senior managers and above attend an inclusive leadership activation lab to help set the foundation for inclusive leadership within Deloitte. We've also put in place gender inclusive talent practices and programs to increase women representation and advance women into leadership roles. So these would include things like our gender smart standards for recruitment, hiring, promotion, and leadership succession, and gender pay equity standards. And also to accelerate our pipeline of women leaders, we have various development and sponsorship programs to build leadership readiness for our high-performing women. So to this effect, our Women's Leading Edge program, which engages with our talented female practitioners earlier in their careers to ramp up our pipeline of future female partner candidates. We also have a WAVE sponsorship program where 100% of our executive management and board is sponsoring at least one female employee to get them to the next career level. So today in Southeast Asia, women make up 45% of our board of directors. but only 33% of our total partners and 21% of our executive. So we still have some work to do in order to achieve our targets that I mentioned earlier. Now, going forward, we will continue to focus our efforts on building, high trust and inclusive cultures to improve our retention and productivity. We'll also be piloting additional programs based on successes we've had elsewhere in our global network, such as our Asia Pacific Inspiring Women program, again, to continue to accelerate the progression of women to the highest levels in our firm. And Encore, which is a return to work program to support talented professionals who have been on career breaks to reemerge in the workforce. And we also deepen the implementation of our domestic and family violence policy. So it's an area that has evolved, particularly during the pandemic, to support our employees if they are going through or at risk of experiencing domestic violence. So just a final word, I would say gender equality and women's empowerment are key focus areas for Deloitte Southeast Asia. It's definitely not a tick the box activity for us. So we are, making very deliberate and continuous choices to make gender balance the norm all throughout our organization. Okay. Back to you, Katja.
Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing this very practical examples and approach. And obviously, this is one company, and maybe there are not many more out there, which is not true. We know from our research. I just want to continue to have the conversation, and I might come back to you, but I'm going to ask first Ibu Maya to join us in. And Ibu Maya, you have been working many years. I've just looked at your bio this morning again, more than 20 years in HR and diversity and inclusion throughout that career. So you're very much experienced within a company, but you also have been working very strongly over the past years in the Indonesia's Business Coalition for Women's Empowerment, IBCWE, to really work with a larger number of companies to really drive gender equality forward. And I would like to hear from your experience is what we have heard from Mike. Is this the reality out there? What do you see when working with companies, and what do we need to make sure that this becomes systemic, that this doesn't stay with individual companies only, but really takes this forward? And Maya, since I know you so well and we have been working a lot together, I'm just gonna also prepare you already. There are some questions coming in the chat, and would be great if people also want to answer them in there, and I might address some of them directly with you as well. But let us hear from your side, Ibu Maya, already.
Thank you, Katja. And thank you for inviting me to these events. And it's been a wonderful journey with UN Women for the last couple of years under the WeEmpowerAsia. I think go back to the questions about what we can do to deepen the commitment and the action from the companies towards the workplace gender equality, or advancing the women leadership in the companies. I think it needs to go back to what's in it for them. I think that's the first key. And I think Mike Deloitte found that already, what's in it for you in the business for that. That's why it's becoming like a changing of a culture. That's really important. And finding that's what's in it for me from the business perspective. It's unfortunately a lot of business still thinking gender it's part of the social movement, not really thinking it from the economic perspective. So I think it's important for us to find that what's in it for them, for the business, to bring more deepened commitment. The second one, it's about assisting companies in finding that business case, or finding the perspective for them to find, and working on the practicality, how they can advancing the woman empowerment or gender equality in their companies. So that's the two things I think needs. And the third one, it's about a little competitiveness wouldn't hurt for the companies, because that's what we've seen, Katja, on the WEBS award. that we have done for the last 3 years, that how the award is actually driving companies to be more, to be more creative and finding the way to work best, what's work best for their companies, to advancing gender equality. It's not only good for their business, but it's also good for their profile as well when they win the award. So I've seen that a lot. Being the regional judge with you as well, Katja, we've seen a lot of a good initiative from companies in Asia Pacific in advancing women empowerment and gender equality. And if we continue this work, I think soon we will see that as a norm. It's a changing culture in Asia Pacific to bring women more into the leadership or even on the business. Back to you, Katja.
Maya, can I just follow up a little bit on this, and also kind of responding to, we had a question from Shibumi in the chat. Where does the conversation on gender equality comes in when we speak about non-binary or trans people? That's how she framed the question in the chat. But I just thought, because we've heard from Mike, about inclusive leadership as such, which it goes beyond the dimensions of gender. And in my experience, I've been also seeing with some of the companies that we are working with, we are looking at much bigger diversity and inclusion dimensions. Is there something where you could share on this, what you have experienced working with businesses in Indonesia, but also in general? Are we speaking, what are we speaking about when we speak about gender equality and other dimensions of diversity? What's sort of your feeling where we stand?
Well, I think it's more like how companies framing that into the conversation, Katja, because when I think this is quite a general, I would say, misperception in Indonesia, at least, that when we talk about gender equality, it means treating everyone the same. While we understand that gender equality, it's about recognizing the differences between, at least between men and women. And if we can bring also the other gender, we have a different life experience, a different way of upbringing. So therefore, when companies or management recognize that differences, and meaning understand that everyone has a different way to achieve it, then it will spark the creativity on how ensuring everyone will get the opportunity, the equal opportunity with a different way. So I think that's how the companies can frame it. And in my experience, that I'm working as an HR in the era that one size fits all, Katja, and I know how it's a big failure, I think, in most companies as well, when you try to treat everyone the same. I think it's time for companies to do as well. And I think COVID it's actually shined the light, just like what Louis said before, that COVID has really shined the light on how companies start to think that they need to treat everyone not treated equally, in the sense that they can have a different way to achieve it, but providing the equal opportunity is the key for that, and recognizing that everyone has a different way and a different life experience on achieving that. So I think
Thank you very much, Maya. And we will be sharing some resources as well in terms of that in the chat later and post the session. I just want to make sure that we keep a little bit also in the timing. So thank you very much for both reflecting on this. And speaking about, you were speaking about, Maya, on a bit of competition doesn't hurt companies. And I fully agree to this. And I don't think only the WEBS Awards is an example of this, but you were also basing a little bit in terms of reporting, and we have heard from Ibu Shinda upfront the work that you are doing on reporting. In really 2 minutes, Ibu Maya, will you be able to just share a little bit sort of the importance of reporting and how that can help to really drive systemic change?
Well, I think we all agree when we said that what gets measured get done, and we need to have, I would say, the baseline. At least we need to have a baseline on the companies, how you can put that in writing. I mean, we don't know how progress you made if the reporting is not available, right? And of course, we don't encourage companies to just, you know, saying things without the supporting data. And I think this is the norm. This is the culture that we need to change. And I think, you know, like what we are doing right now, Katja, about the gender reporting framework and practical guidelines to company to help them where they can report it, report the gender situation in the company, it would help them. I mean, from our experience, a lot of companies actually have the practices, at least, you know, to advancing about women leadership, but they don't know that that's leading to workplace gender equality. What they do know, oh, I have this different need from my women employees, so I need to tackle of this. They just don't know. So I think it's important for us to show them what they're doing is actually already good, and let's put it on the report, and I help them how they can report it. And of course, at the end of the day, it will, you know, increase the profile of the companies. And it will be good if, you know, I think it's going to be the segue to the next speaker. It's about how investor could also drive the importance of gender reporting, Katja.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ibu Maya. And sorry. Thank you very much, Ibu Maya. And I want to use that segue to introduce our next speaker, Patricia Mathias, who is the head of the gender platform of the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, AVPN. But Patricia has been working for a long time also in the private sector herself and brings a wealth of information. But now Patricia is working very much with the investors ecosystem. And Patricia, I would like to bring you into the conversation with two questions. Maya said, what measures gets done? How does that translate into the investment sector? So those questions basically, having more data, does this lead to getting more finance in the hands of women, or how could this happen? And what have you seen in the sector, in the genderless investing sector, how we would call it, and how Luis also referred to it? What has happened there, and what needs to be happening next to further advance that?
Thank you, Katja. It is a privilege to be here. Those are big questions. So let me try and share my perspective as succinctly as possible. So yes, Maya is right. I agree with her. What measures gets reported. And now with much more awareness about gender aggregated data, guidelines, measures, etc., you find that a lot of investors are holding companies accountable. We've had an example of one of our AVPN members that actually attends investor meetings and asks the questions, asks to see the gender aggregated data, compares, writes reports. And all of that is creating a very positive, virtuous cycle to get more capital in the hands of women. You asked about developments in the investment ecosystem through gender lens investing. And I think versus 5 years ago, when a lot of the idea was just about what is gender lens investing, we've now moved to how to do gender lens investing. And as that transition has happened, we're seeing a lot more mainstream capital moving into gender investing, both in the private, like say Gobi Partners from Southeast Asia, or public capital, like could be Wardaven Capital from Vietnam. And so the ecosystem is no longer dominated only by some niche impact funds or developmental financial institutions. But there is much more awareness, more broad stream, mainstream capital moving there. Another interesting development is also how innovative methods of financing are coming together. One example is an AVPN partner investing in women, and Manila Angel Investors Network set up a sidecar fund to increase more investments into women-led businesses in the Philippines. We've also just heard that the Sasakawa Peace Foundation has recently committed to invest about $3 million in the Women's World Banking Fund. Now, all these models are encouraging businesses and fund managers to consider gender along the value chain. not just how we stereotypically think of gender lens investing in either products for women or the founders are women. And this is creating a lot more innovation in the system as well. Katja, you had like a second question, I think, when you asked the questions, which is about what kind of investments can support the advancement of women's economic empowerment. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, just so that I make sure I answer your question. So I think there are a few things that can help us move forward. One is definitely investment in the care economy. In any survey that you do to kind of try and understand what's holding women investors back, holding women back, holding women from scaling their businesses back, the whole care issue comes up in the top 3, top 5 reasons why women can't scale up. And all kinds of investments to help alleviate some of that burden would definitely help. I think investments that are community-centric, and really helping facilitate access to markets. And Shinta Kamdani, who is a member of the Asia Gender Network and shared some of her thoughts earlier today, she does a lot of work in this space, connecting rural women-led enterprises to the larger markets in Indonesia and across Asia. And those kind of investments can really change the ecosystem as well. And I think also investments that work with large companies and financial authorities to commit to industry shifting guidelines. Grace Forrest, who's also a member of the Asia Gender Network, actually, and she and her organization Walk Free partnered with the Stock Exchange of Thailand. And as they did that, that really created a whole new way of looking at things, because they produce a set of tools, etc., guidance on modern day slavery, reduction of trafficking, human rights, etc., so that companies that are listed on the stock exchange need to follow those practices. Now, through all these type of efforts, I think we're getting a lot more investor interest in what companies are doing. It's becoming a little bit more transparent. And as a result, there is a greater flourishing of the ecosystem to support women. But finally, just before I wrap up, I think besides financial investments, there's also need for investment in capability building, investment in networks, investment in support systems, so that we can support women entrepreneurs, support women in the business, and partner together with them to deliver a more equal world, which is what I guess the mission that all of us coming here together are really bound by.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Really insightful as well. And some of the things you mentioned, we're going to be going into more depth in the workshop sessions that coming up after we finished with the panel in terms of the care economy and sort of that industry connect and industry ecosystem change. So I think really thank you so much for setting this clear. So we are already deeper in the marketplace. So we had heard from leadership into workplaces through Maya, and we now went into the marketplace with Pat on the investors ecosystem. And we're going to stay in the marketplace. And one of the findings we've seen in the research that Luis shared with us is that the action for the moment is still very much concentrated in the area of women in leadership, women in workplaces. And the more we get into the depths of supply chain, into marketplace, the more nascent the developments are and the impacts currently, or the actions that are taken. And I'm really pleased that we have Linda Kromjong with us, who is the president of Amphori. And some of you might not know Amphori, but Amphori is a very large trade association, EU-based, with a lot of suppliers operating here in our region in Asia and the Pacific. And Linda, we are thrilled to not only have Amphori as a partner within the WeEmpowerAsia program, but also to really hear about that work that you are doing when it comes to gender equality. So it would be great to hear more from your personal perspective, but obviously also the work that Amphori is doing. How are you managing with such a large membership base of friends and suppliers to bring a gender lens into that work, into deeper supply chains? And really much more importantly also, what do we need to do to really accelerate action in that area, which seemed to be so nascent compared to some of the other areas? Over to you, Linda.
Yes, thanks, Katja, and thanks all. I do apologize for my voice, but I'm having a bit of a cold. I think great intervention until now, and I think those are all pieces of the puzzle that we need to build together, and Amphori is also part of that puzzle, I view. I joined Amphori 1st of January of this year, first female president for Amphori. And what is Amphori about? We have a membership-based organization. We've got 2,500 members, companies, small businesses, but also multinationals who are a member. Why are they our member? Because we help them in their due diligence for the supply chain to really assess both the environmental as the social aspects, but also looking into aspects as governance, such as, do we have the right data to report on to show transparency? Is there access to grievance handling within the supply chain? Is the quality of the suppliers right? Are they fit to do business with? 2,500 members means, a larger number of suppliers that they are working with. And we help them in assessing and auditing them. And not every supplier, of course, is audited every year. But just to give you a bit of a number, it's 35,000 assessments a year. But the number of suppliers, of course, is much, much larger. Gender equality is very close to my heart. I think it's really crucial. And as has been mentioned, it's not because we are doing this not because we just want to be nice. 50% of the world population is women. They deserve a spot. And it has been proven, and we've seen the facts and the data, that women, contribute to successful business, but also to successes in society. So we need both women and men. Looking back into, I think, leading by example, what about our own team to start with? First female president, that's me. The majority of the team of Amphori are women. We elected last week a new board of directors. 7 out of 9 are women. And the board elected the first women chair. So I think we're making progress there, as well as having, say, equal representation in our stakeholder advisory council. If we look into our products, as I said, we offer solutions. We help companies to really, make sure that they conduct due diligence throughout the supply chain in a good manner. And one of the core products here is our Code of Conduct on Social, BSCI, the Business Social Compliance Initiative. And what we did over the last year is really strengthening that Code of Conduct on many elements, but also including on gender. And what we did, we worked with UN Women, we worked with BSR to include this gender lens throughout the system, not only the Code of Conduct, but also what do you do with it afterwards? How do you measure it? What questions do you ask? What training do you need to supply with? What's really crucial, and we have heard that already with many of you of the intervention, is data. Without data, if we don't measure, we don't know where we are, we don't know what progress is, but also if data are not being part of KPIs, it just doesn't get done. So we offer data to our members to understand, the gender diversity within their supply chain. I acknowledge also, having seen the question, that diversity, of course, is more than only gender. And there's much more work to be done. But, let's start here first and then along the side, address also the other diversity issues that we still have at hand. We focused on the data because we know that women are more vulnerable within the supply chain, so we need to have those data. We still need awareness raising. Maybe it's still sad to acknowledge that, but I think that's the reality. We are not done yet. Still many companies, small and big ones, not have the real understanding about what it means or what the added value would be if we would be very gender diverse and gender equal. So we organize events and awareness, including awareness with executives, highlighting the importance of C-level commitments. And I think, Michael, you also shared the relevance of that one in your intervention. We also work with young women on the Women Empowerment Activators program, and this led to a pilot about about gender responsive procurement, because that's also where it starts. If you want to trigger change, we need to approach it from different angles within the companies, but also in, say, if companies want to do business with you, asking, but these are the requirements, not only the quality and the price, but also gender diversity is going to be a distinguishing factor whether or not I would like to do business with you. So we worked on this program, piloting this with a selected number of members to establish supplier diversity programs. But also we really went to, that's what happens. Change happens on the ground within small and medium enterprises. So we work with our suppliers in key sourcing countries, China, India, Bangladesh, focusing on the women empowerment principles, having webinars, having social dialogues, because it's also important that we have those dialogues with the women in the room. And so far in those countries, we trained 350, say, the senior managers of companies, but also had 800 women in the room and really trying to empower them to step up. Because we can only drive change if we build this ecosystem. And I heard the word ecosystem already earlier, throughout the entire supply chain, because that's the only, I would say, sustainable way forward. Katja, I'm aware that you are probably running against time, but you also asked me the questions, what is that we can do more further? We need to accelerate, say, the impact. And what is it here? There is more we can do. I think awareness raising, it remains instrumental. We should not be satisfied, where we currently are. There is more to be done. And as said, this does include listening and engaging with women, because they can tell you the best, what is that they need for them to progress and contribute to the best of their capabilities. Commitment of the top, that's what matters, has been addressed already before. Women empowerment principles, I think a great instrument to start this journey within companies. But what is it that we can do, say, as a collaborative industry scheme? First of all, we can't do it alone. We need to do it with our members, and we need to do it with our suppliers. We will also need to do it jointly with other industry initiatives, because we are not the only one focusing on this one. The Responsible Business Alliance, for example, also focus on gender responsive procurement. So we need to collaborate. We also need to collaborate with governance, NGOs, UN, civil society, to drive and accelerate change. And let me come back to procurement and why that can really be a driver of change if we include gender diversity as a parameter, what you need to fulfill in order to do business. I think that's really a strong lever we can use. But we also should not underestimate the power of state-owned enterprises, public procurement. They can be a big driver of change. If we would really make sure that they include in every public procurement tender gender diversity as a must meet, I think that would be a driver of change. We see this happening in Europe, but we also know what happens in Europe, is touching upon more companies within the supply chain, and therefore also impacting Asia. Coming back to Europe, also Europe is not perfect, being very clear here. There's still a lot more to be done. I worked in and with Asia, also in my previous roles. And one of the things that I just want to conclude with, that I have had interaction with many great women, entrepreneurs, leaders within companies who have great ambitions and power. It's up to us to unlock that. I am a true believer that we can do that together. And work jointly on, say, on a better future to overcome the hurdles that do exist, whether they're culturally, whether they're institutionally. There's many that we know, but working together, for me, collaboration, I think that's the key thing. Katja, I hope I answered your question here. Do let me know if you want me to deep dive a bit further on some of the elements I mentioned.
I think you didn't only answer questions for me, but I think you mentioned listening, and I think it's really enlightening listening to different perspectives. And I think your perspective is a really interesting one, and maybe not so many have access to that perspective. So thank you so much, Linda. And definitely you have touched on a couple of areas which we will be deepening in a couple of minutes when we go into our breakout rooms. But thank you very much for sharing your experience here with Amphori, and thank you for collaborating together. What I would like to do, we have been listening, and we always do this to the market, to the organizations that we are working with. But I would like to ask you for a couple of more minutes for attention to listen also to what our different country colleagues have to say. Because Linda, I think you mentioned there's a lot to learn from Europe. There's a lot to learn within Asia, and I think there's a lot of potential for cross-fertilization. And I would just like to share a very short video, because we didn't have time to have our program managers nor our country representatives to speak in the panel. So yeah, or Amy, if you would be so kind and just share their perspective in a very short video. Thank you very much.
In Thailand, we saw a solid growing of interest and uptake from larger and listed companies, particularly around setting goals, building pipeline, and creating enabling environment for board diversity and for more women to become board of directors.
The UN Women We Empower Asia Philippines is very pleased to include in its accomplishment the opportunity to develop a module that would assist publicly listed companies in ensuring that gender data is included in their sustainability reports.
We supported many companies using the WEB's framework. We took them from assessing their gender gaps to action planning, and there were also very workable recommendations that were provided so that they could continue to monitor and track the progress on their gender equality initiatives.
Together with the private sector, we're co-creating interventions around women's safety and supply chains, their access to finance through sustainable finance models, as well as on access to markets through gender-responsive procurement for women.
Many of these companies have signed up to the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, and some have been appointed to be G20 Empower Advocates, who are in an influential position to help shape G20 policy recommendations that fully support women's economic empowerment.
A key result that we are really proud of is the leadership and commitment of ICT and textile industry associations to have developed guidance based on WEBs for the entire sector, benefiting at least 12,483 companies in the country.
The biggest achievement with the We Empower Asia program in Vietnam was to strengthen the enabling environment to support women-owned enterprises and women entrepreneurs in Vietnam to get the support they need to grow and thrive. We did this by engaging multiple stakeholders from the government, but also private sector, and also women-led organizations and academia.
Going forward, we're really looking at priorities that include women's access to finance through gender lens investing and our work on gender responsive budgeting with the national and state governments.
The various gender responsive business guidelines and policy reviews that we have developed with our partners can hopefully be applied across ASEAN in support of the role of business in influencing the sustainability agenda, especially the goal of gender equality and leaving no one behind.
We will work hard and smart with local partners, both government and private sectors, so that more diverse entrepreneurs, women-led and including other marginalized groups, are able to access both private and public procurement markets.
And we want with the program to enable market access through procurement opportunities for women operating micro, small, and medium enterprises so that they can grow, thrive, and go farther in the supply chain.
Really hope to see sustained efforts so that the engagement would continue for all of these conversations to be converted into actions as they all commit to develop and implement programs that is aligned to the women's empowerment principles.
The mission for realizing women's economic rights needs sustained commitment and engagement of a wide range of stakeholders. We look forward to strengthening collaboration with all our partners in China for this continued journey and joint effort.
So gender equality must be a strategic business priority. It cannot be treated as another HR initiative if companies really want to harness the value of gender diversity. Full inclusion of women in the economy benefits all.
Great. So I hope that gave you also a little bit of an idea sort of what has been done in the country offices and to bring their voices to the table. We will be also discussing with some of our country teams in the next part of the forum, but I think you all have a very well-deserved break now. But before we go, in a very quick 5 minutes break, if possible, a huge thank you to the panel for giving us such a very practical experience. Thanks for sharing your insights, and looking forward to take some of this into our further conversation. So a warm thank you to Luis to kick us off, and then to the rest of the panel. Thank you so much ladies and gentlemen. And so I'm gonna see you all back at 2:35 Bangkok time. For some that might be early morning or some evening. And we come back all in this room, and then I'll give, sorry, I might have a cold as well. And then I'll gonna help you to find your rooms. There will be two breakout rooms, one on the care economy and one on creating an enabling and policy environment to advance women in business. So you can think about this, get a coffee, get a tea, and see you back in 5 minutes, bit more than 5 minutes, 2:35 if possible. Okay, we're gonna mute everyone. And if there are questions or anything, please put your comments in the chat and we try to address them in the next part of the forum. See you in a bit.